First, Ian Bose from Putnam County. He is a fourth-year teacher, and he actually had 3 teachers from his school participate together. Very excited to have Ian with us today. He teaches pre-calculus, AP, or calculus, and ACE courses. And we also have Angelique Linton from Hillsborough County. She's at Lato High School, and that school had, I think it was 5 or 6 teachers. They had quite a few teachers participate in our cadre. She has 18 years experience, and this past year she taught Algebra 1A and college algebra. We also have Carrie Sadler from Pasco County. Carrie has taught 29 years and is at Riverbridge High School. And she is currently working in geometry and geometry honors. And then last but not least, of course, Anna Stewart from Nassau County from Yulee Middle School. She is the math lead at her school and also teaches 6th grade math with 19 years experience. So huge welcome to the 4 of you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. How are you guys doing? Everybody's off mute. Go ahead and come off mute so that you can talk with us. Perfect. All right. Angelique, if you can take yourself off. Yep, there we go. All right, good. We want to make sure we can hear you. It has been just such an amazing experience for all of us. And I'm curious because you had to apply. You had to decide to do this. So what interested you most in the cadre, and what really helped you make that decision to go ahead and apply? And we'll go ahead. We'll start with Anna, but I'd love all 4 of you to answer this one.
Why? Because over my 19 years, I was trained under an absolutely fabulous principal, but she trained me to do what she wanted me to do. Therefore, all the teachers would come in my room, or I would go in their room and watch them. So for 19 years, I have been helping everyone else. I had been given of myself so much that I was at the point of deciding whether or not I was coming back next year. My principal's on here, so she's going to be like, what? So, I mean, I hadn't renewed my certificate because I truly didn't know. I was burnt out, and I was given all of myself to my students and to my fellow coworkers, and to my district. So I decided let's see what help I can get. So I started this, and I'm going to tell you, with my first survey, I cried. I broke down, and I was like, this is confirmation I'm not in this. I'm done. I need to find another career. However, thankfully, Kelly got me with Tiana, a coach, and she guided me through it. I could not talk to my kids about the survey at first because I was devastated, but Tiana talked me through it. She gave me suggestions. I swallowed my pride, and I remembered that, regardless of if I was going to continue this career or not, I still had 6 months with these children. And for those 6 months, I needed to give 100%, and I needed to give my all. And I did just that. And the kids' scores improved greatly, and we became a community and a family. So I did this for myself, but the result was the growth of my students and now my future students.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you for being so vulnerable. And just to reiterate, she is coming back next year. Angelique, what about you?
Okay, so along similar lines, I think you've been teaching longer than I have, but this is my 18th year. And I think the last 2 years, I think a lot of people, if you've been teaching a while, this was the most difficult 2 years I've been to in comparison to maybe when I first started teaching. And when I first started teaching, I went to a professional development. They'd sent us down to Amelie Arena, and they had a host come in and talk to us about the teaching profession and what you needed to be and where you needed to go. And I think it was my second year of teaching. And I think that the presenter got up there and talked about instructors that have been teaching a long time and their gold-plated lesson plans. And I laughed and I thought it was funny. I said, gold-plated lesson plans, what does that mean? And if you continue to teach and you continue to work at your profession, you understand what that means. So I just felt a need to evolve, and that's the key. So the teacher that was teaching for 25 years, I fully understand it. Teaching is a journey. And if you stand in one place and you don't improve, even if you're really, really good at what you're doing, you're not really going anywhere. And that's what I needed. I said, I need to continue growing and evolving. I'm in my 18th year. I still want to do this for 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever many years. And I need to grow and evolve and get some new and different ideas. Our school is strong. We had 5 teachers participate. We do a lot of professional development. We do a lot of different things, but with the impact survey and the whole entire experience, I felt the need for some new ideas and a new experience. After 18 years, I wanted to evolve and I wanted to grow. And this has afforded me the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Angelique. Ian, what about you?
So I am a second career teacher, so the content comes naturally to me, but the teaching isn't. And this was an opportunity for me to improve as a teacher. My school has a lot of fantastic educators that I look up to and that I learn from. And this was another opportunity for me to get better as a teaching practice. You know, kind of echoing what Anna and Angelique have already said, like teaching is a practice. You have to continually get better and learn and evolve. And this was an opportunity for me to do that directly with my students. You get feedback from your principals, your administrators about how you're doing, but the reality is that's a narrow set of criteria. Are you doing this? Are you doing this? But this truly was, what do my students think of me? How do they view the classroom? So it was a great opportunity for me in that regard, and also the one-on-one coaching and everything to continue to grow as an educator.
That's a great reflection. And I love how all of you have such a different story and a path, but we're all here together. And I know, Carrie, I'd love to bring you in here on this one too.
Well, I'm a numbers person, and I've been teaching this. I just finished my 29th year. And I've said so many times over the past few years, especially since the pandemic, kids are not the same. Kids are not the same. I don't know how, like, they're just not the same. Their work ethic is different. The way they learn is different. Everything has to be digital. And so I struggled a lot with the idea that if I cared enough about them, that I could get them to come over to my side. And what I thought is, I keep saying it's about me, and trying to get them to come to and be part of what I was doing, even though I would still say to myself, kids are so different, kids are so different. So for me, it was an opportunity to get the experience of what is it I have to evolve. I have to change right along so that I can meet their needs better. And I thought for such a long time, how can we get the kids back of yesteryear? Because when I was in college 30 years ago, the idea is that you started your teaching career, but you should not engage in any personal conversations with students, and you're not there to be their friend, and you're not there, you shouldn't care whether they like you or not. And that just simply doesn't work. And I learned that pretty quickly 30 years ago, that it just doesn't work that way. So for me, I really started off in the cadre because there were a few catchphrases on the email we got, and it was elevate your kids' test scores. And I thought, I have to know how to do that because they learn differently now. They are different now. So I thought there was some sort of math class I was going to be taking that was going to help me raise their math scores. So after our first meeting, I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I thought they were going to give me the keys of all the new things that I need to. And for me, it was probably the best experience and very eye-opening. And the things that I have been saying for the past few years about how students have changed over the course of 30 years and how they learn differently made me realize going through this process that they are different, but we have to do things differently as well to meet where they're at. And so that was the thing that I took from this, and feel grateful that I followed through.
Thank you, Carrie. And I love how you're talking about meeting your students and how different they are. And I'm wondering, and I'll jump right back with you, Carrie, on this one. How did you feel after your first survey? Because it wasn't massive changes and all these things. Like, we were just asking you to survey your students. So were you surprised? How did you feel? Was it tough? What was going through your head?
Well, I read the questions prior to giving the first survey, and I knew we had met as a community, so I kind of knew what I was looking for. And so I had anticipated after the first survey that my low areas were probably going to be for meaningful work. Come on, we're math teachers, and they don't see any meaning in that. And perhaps feedback for growth. That's what I anticipated was going to be the two areas that I struggled with, because teacher caring, check that off the list. I know they know I care about them. So that's not going to be an issue. I do lots of things in my classroom to let them know I care about them. I would bring in cupcakes, and I realize it's high school, on the first Monday of each month, and celebrate whoever's birthday was in that month and give them a cupcake. And we have whiteboard tables in my room that I paint every year, and I keep the classroom colorful, and we have, all kinds of things to let them know that I cared. So that was not going to be an issue. And after the first survey, I did not have a coach. So after the first survey, and I got to meet with Kelly, I was devastated, because teacher caring, if I remember correctly, was at something like 62% of my students rated me positively for caring about them. And I thought, that's a D-. And I don't even know about any of the other results of that survey, because I was so devastated over the fact that my students really didn't have that belief that I really did care about them. So was I surprised? Yeah, I was devastated. And Kelly, thank God, had got me a coach who talked me off the ledge, because I did not know how I was going to fix that. And nothing else mattered to me at that point, because if the kids don't think you care about them, they're not going to work for you. And that was going to be my main focus over the course of, the cadre work. Although it was my biggest focus from the beginning, I did add in other focus areas, but continued my growth in the teacher caring. And so for me, I was devastated. My ego was hurt. And frankly, I did not want to share my results with the students after the first survey, because the little changes that I did make, I didn't want to seem inauthentic to the students, because it was all really authentic to me. Everything that I did and the small changes that I made from getting the feedback, I just didn't, and I never did share the results after my first survey, because it was really hurtful to me that I didn't really relate to them how I do care. After I changed that, of course, my results went up over the course of the next 3 surveys. And so with that, I was very pleased. But I did add in other things, like meaningful work and student voice throughout the course of the semester, and worked on other things. But that was the one thing that I knew if I didn't fix that right away, there wasn't going to be anything I could do at that point, because if they don't know that you truly care, they will not work as a community. They will not feel the ownership of being in there. And so for me, it was devastating. I shared results with them after every other survey, but not that one, because I didn't want the changes that I made to seem inauthentic.
And Carrie, I don't know if you saw, but Michelle, who's also part of the cadre, who's on the call today, just put a note in the chat that she experienced the same thing right there with you. And this was a common experience, and this is something that we anticipated, but I don't think knew to the level of how much it was going to impact each teacher. And so we really appreciate you being open and honest about it, because it wasn't easy in the beginning. And I don't know, I'm assuming it seemed like things got easier for you all, but does anyone else want to share a little bit about how they felt after their first survey?
So just to echo, it was painful, and I think she spoke really clearly on that. It was painful for me. The thing that I always felt like, I'm a math teacher, and obviously to us as math teachers and educators, we know that math is meaningful. My scores for a meaningful work were so low, and it was devastating. I'm like, what do you mean? And I don't give busy work. I don't understand. Why did the students not feel that what we're doing in this class is meaningful and relatable? And it took me a while. And same thing, I needed some coaching, and I needed some help as to where I got started, where you get started. And from that, just not to, make everybody feel negative about the whole entire thing. It motivated me. It motivated me. I got some coaching. I got some ideas, and it motivated me because I was like, okay, let's go. Math is not meaningful. The classes that I teach are not meaningful. And it doesn't mean that it's not, it's just how it relates to them. And for me, like I said, I had to get back to that, like look at it through what they're looking at and what they're seeing. And that was the whole point of this, you know, listening to that student voice. And when I listened to what they were saying and what they were feeling, and I worked on the things that they put into those surveys, I saw real positive changes and positive growth.
Thank you, Angelique. And Ian, sorry, you look like you're going to jump in. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add that I had the same reaction after the first survey, and the coaching helped. But for me, it was actually some of my students. When I shared my results with them, some of my students were like, "Who wrote that?" And like they were about ready to, you know, start a riot in the classroom trying to figure out who, you know, who rated me so poorly or who made the comments. So like I still had lots of improvement to do, but that it was the, you know, the light, the glimmer of hope for me. Like, okay, no, there are some students that get it and that realize I do care. So how do I get to the rest of them?
Yes. And that's a great point that, excuse me, I had mentioned before, is that they did receive free response answers as well. So that's what Ian's talking about there, is the students could anonymously leave actual free response answers to the questions as well. To keep us moving along, I just got a few more questions here before we open it up to Q&A. We've mentioned a couple different learning conditions, so teacher caring, meaningful work. So I'm curious, what learning conditions did you focus on over the course of the cadre? Anna or Ian, do you want to jump into that one?
I focused on student voice and meaningful work. It was hard to choose what to focus on because the first survey was so low. So I really struggled in what area did I want them to be successful. And I knew meaningful work because they were sixth graders, and sixth grade is a hard year anyway. They're starting middle school. However, if they did not have that foundation and that background of why they needed to know this math, they're going to continue to struggle with math throughout the rest of their schooling and their career potentially. So I knew I had to hone in on why this was important for them and how they were going to benefit from meaningful work. So we did a lot with meaningful work in my classroom. And the goal was to see not only, you know, how often do we receive the question, when will I use this? Will I ever need this? So I wanted the kids to find out how important it was to know math. So we did simple things like, you know, if I went to a restaurant, what kind of tip would I leave? Or if I went to the store and wanted a discount and this is how much I had, what could I purchase? You know, we did a budgeting unit in my classroom and the kids found out some of them, they didn't want that career anymore because they were not going to be able to afford the lifestyle they wanted. So in them finding out why they needed math and how it was important to them, I feel like that increased the teacher caring. They understood I wasn't just giving them busy work. I wasn't just giving them packets that they needed to do and assignments that they needed to complete and test. I was setting them up for success for the rest of their life. And so in doing that, you know, it really solidified my teacher really cares about me. She wants me to be successful. I also did student voice because you know, when your county tells you you need to do small group, you need to do whole group, and you do it, the kids come in, they sit down and they're quiet. They do what they're supposed to. You know, they listen, they do it. But what are they really getting out of it? You know, I mean, they were making good grades. They were doing what I asked them to do. However, until I really honed in on listening to them, not just telling them what to do, but actually listening to what they had to say, I realized these kids want more than a piece of paper. They want more than working with a group. They want to sometimes work with specific people. Sometimes they want to do technology. Sometimes they want to do a game. So in listening to them, we created choice boards in my classroom and they were able to thrive. They started asking each other questions. They started having fun. You saw smiles, you saw engagement. They were learning from each other. And that's truly what it was all about, was creating that classroom community so that they could be successful in everything that they did.
Thank you so much, Anna. Anyone else want to jump into that question before I move on? That's okay. We've got so much information here. I've got one more question for you all before we open it up to the audience here for questions. With the surveys, the community calls, the check-ins, the planning, I mean, there were so many things that you were required to do, that we were asking you to do. And I'm sure everyone is wondering, how much time did this take? Like, how much did these teachers put in? Because it sounds like a ton. So I'm curious if you guys could kind of give us an idea on a regular week, how much time did you put in? And did this, do you feel like it took away? Because Angelique, you and I have talked about how you were teaching a tested course. So did it take away from what you were able to do with the content you were required to get through?
I chopped it down. So I had, my kids are 11th graders last year, and they had failed the Algebra 1 SFSA. So time is of an essence. I've got to get these kids that have failed 1, 2, and 3 times. This time is the charm. They need to pass it. So for me, I think I chopped it down. I approached it like, okay, I'm going to do one thing on this every single day. You know, I just made it like that, except for Saturdays, and I tried not to do it on the weekend. But during the school day, I gave myself a goal of you know, working on one thing to do with the impact survey. And then that felt manageable. And I felt like, okay, I'm not spending 20 minutes on this when I had to do, because we always know there's always something to do and not enough time. So I just set myself a small goal. And sometimes it was 10 minutes, sometimes it was 5 minutes. Sometimes I spent a significant amount of time, especially when the surveys came in or when I was coached on those different days. But I just set myself a goal of, you know, every single day to check in on the board, to check in with the coaching, and just to check in and just to check off one thing every day with that. And I didn't give myself a time limit, and that made it manageable for me.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, to put a number to it, I think when I filled out the end of the year survey or the end of the cadre survey, it was probably 2 hours a week for me. And most of that was spent, you know, spread out over 15, 20 minutes here or there. But looking at the data, and some of it was spent with the coach. And for me, the one-on-one coaching was helpful, you know, in terms of the content of it, but dedicating that 45 minutes, that hour to, okay, for the next hour, this is what I'm going to do, was almost just as useful as the coaching itself is setting aside that time. But in terms of taking away from class, I think, especially as math teachers, especially in Florida, where algebra is a graduation requirement, where if you don't pass, they don't graduate. There's no, you know, you do not pass go, you do not collect $200. You know, we constantly struggle against the clock. Oh, we have to do this today. Oh, we have to do this today, because that's what the pacing guide said, or that's what, you know, when you divide the curriculum by 100 and, well, it's not even 180 days. It's like 125 days by the time you factor everything out. We're like, okay, we don't have enough time, so we just got to keep going. We lose, at least for myself, but we lose sight of sometimes doing something that's not directly beneficial is actually worth spending the time. And for me, that's how I viewed a lot of the cadre was, yes, this is going to be 5 to 10 minutes that my kids need to sit in class and take the survey, but it's useful data that was worth taking that 5-10 minutes to spend. You know, giving up 15-20 minutes of my planning time to look over the data on a Tuesday was worth that time. And I think all educators kind of suffer from that of, well, we only have 180 days. It's this, that, or the other important. And we lose track of sometimes that classroom community making work meaningful is worth spending that time, because we don't realize the connections. We don't realize that web of connections that it's forming in the kids' brains, that it's forming in our classroom communities, and how important that can be at the end of the year when they do take that test and they do have that confidence. They're like, oh, I kind of know this. You know, and we all know that test anxiety, that's half the battle, is just getting students to approach it as, yes, I can.
That's right. Thank you, Ian. Carrie, what about you?
I was pleasantly surprised because, you know, sometimes when people say, oh, it's only a 5-minute survey or 10-minute survey, and it's not, you know, I don't know if you've ever experienced that before. So my first get-go with the survey, I was really pleasantly surprised that they weren't spending, it wasn't taking too much time away from my class. And waiting until that Monday for me to get the results was a little bit worrisome, I suppose. But when I did, I think the thing that I did was I wrote down all of my results and I printed a copy of my report and I highlighted on it the comments that the students made. And just so that I could remind myself that what I'm doing is important and that there are some highlights in this report, and then there are some low areas that I was really crushed about. But the nice thing was on the platform, you can click right on the different strategies and it takes you to different things that you can read. And so it was so easy. I didn't have to go research all this stuff myself because there were all those links. So the time that I spent working on it, I really didn't think of it as working on this solely because it was impacting my classroom. So for me, it was normal work that I would have done. So I couldn't tell you what amount of time I spent per week on it, but I know that I kept my results right in front of me every day. So when I walked into class, I saw them. And that's after my first results. I shared the results after the other surveys, but not after the first one. And just kept saying, what can I do today? Or, you know, at the end of the day, what can I do tomorrow that I didn't do today? And it was such an easy process. You just click on the link and you can read about it or get some ideas. I had the one-on-one coaching, thank goodness, because on the days that you feel like you can't do it anymore, you know, Tiana, she brought up so many good ideas for me and how to help me process what the students were saying when I wasn't feeling 100% happy with my results. So for me, I couldn't tell you how much time I spent, but I know it didn't take away from what I would have normally been spending on schoolwork anyway. For me, it was just very natural. It just came together because I brought it into what I would be doing and planning for the next day. So for me, it didn't seem like I was doing extra work. It seemed like I was doing more important work.
Thank you, Carrie. And that's something we've heard across the cadre, and I love sharing. I love everyone getting to hear that. And I'll share some specifics and data points later on when we get to that. But I'd love to take a couple minutes here to answer any questions that the audience may have specific to the teachers now. So if you have one and you want to drop it in the chat, I've got that open. Or if you'd like to come off mute, you're welcome to do that too. I'll be stunned if there's
This
not
is fascinating. No, I got you, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Cece. I'm very passionate about this. The first time that I heard Impact Florida saying, we're going to now do math, I was like, yes. I'm like, yes, go Mandy. So my first question for all of you is, now that you've gone down this road for this year, what is the right sweet spot that you would recommend a teacher going through this process? Is it like new teacher, year one, just rip off the Band-Aid, year 5, year 7, or like, no. If you don't have at least 15 years of experience, you cannot handle the pressures of the program. What would you recommend?
I would say it's for anybody because we had Josie, who was a first-year teacher, and myself, who was in year 29. And her and I learned so much from each other, and it worked for both of us. With Josie, she doesn't know what it's like 29 years ago to be teaching like I do, and cannot explain what the difference in students, the difference that I see in students from then to now. So for me, it helped me work taking the idea of this is not about me. It is about them. And I can say that students have changed over the past 30 years because they have, but that doesn't mean that I can't change. So for me, it worked. And then for Josie, who was a first-year teacher, it worked. And so I would say this is good for anybody.
Yeah, I echo that. And there is no one size. It's for somebody that's starting out, somebody that's in the middle, and somebody that's saying, you know, after in a couple of years, I'm going to hang it up. That's the whole point. We want to grow, we want to evolve, and we want to listen to our students. And that doesn't matter how long you've been teaching. So it's for everyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's for everyone. I think the only requirement is commitment, and not time. Like, we've all been to PDs where we're like, well, we have to be here, so I'm going to pay the least amount of attention possible because I don't value this as use of my time. This is not that kind of PD. So I think first year or 30 year, it's for everyone. But if they're not willing to make that commitment, they're not going to get as much out of it. It's the same thing we tell our students, whatever you put in is what you're going to get out.
Thank you, Ian. And we did just drop Josie Pierce's profile. It is on our site into the chat. So if you're interested in learning more about Josie, that's there. Megan, I'd love to get to you.
I've heard all of you speak about how much you relied on both the coaches as well as Kelly's input when you had some of those moments where you were struggling with the data, or maybe when you were challenged with attempting something new or different in your classroom. Having gone through this process, if this were to continue with other teachers in your schools or maybe even in your districts, would you feel comfortable coaching them through some of those low points or some of those moments where you're like, I'm not sure I'm coming back next year? How has this impacted your ability, I guess, to be a mentor to other teachers?
So for me, I can say that there was 5 of us at our school, so we were fortunate. I think we had the most in Hillsborough County. I don't know how that worked out, but we had 5 at our school. So we did mentor each other through the process. We had our department head and 4 other teachers. We're all pretty experienced teachers. So I can say, like, if you have somebody at your school site, I would be very comfortable with that. I'm comfortable in that role, in that position. Any one of us would feel comfortable with that. So I would say on a comfort level, just mentoring. I don't know if I would say coaching. I don't know how that works out, but yeah, I would be very comfortable with that.
I would as well. I didn't share this information with any of the math teachers in my department. I kind of just kept it to myself because I wanted to learn as much about it as I could. And then also the time that we started this, when I was really, really heavily invested, a lot of the teachers were jaded. It was that time of the year. And so I thought it's not a good time to tell them how excited I am to come to school tomorrow, because they're gonna be like, what is wrong with you? I mean, so for me, when I did share this with a teacher at my school, I was sharing some of the things that I had learned and some of the comments that the kids had made and how it made me laugh. And she was listening to me and she was so excited. She goes, oh my goodness, they do this in the business world. It's very similar to it. And she got so excited, she started telling my principal about it. And so we have talked quite a bit about it, and we're gonna try and start something at our school next year while we're working on it. But for me, I would feel comfortable because I know what it feels like to go, how in the world could I score so low in that one area I thought I was going to score so well in? And so I know what it feels like to be that low. And I also now know that there are other things that I can show them in their reports that they could feel better about and explain, just like Tiana did and Kelly did with me. They really, really helped so much. And so I would feel comfortable doing that.